Hello, everyone. Now, what we're talking about today is, as you brands know, everyone wants to be everywhere, all at once, where their consumer is. But in this always online era, if you're only focused on the moment when she's actually buying, you're putting the destination before the journey. And the journey is what brought her to the point of sale. She may have seen your product initially in a Get Ready With Me on TikTok. Then she heads to your site because she wants to learn more, but there are only a few hundred reviews, right? So then she goes to Amazon, where she's seeing thousands of reviews, and she's watching shorts of people actually using your product. Bingo, that's where she sells. Front Row calls this connected commerce. It's recognizing that today's customer journey is layered, it's nonlinear, and it's happening everywhere all at once. And if your moments like that are not connected, growth stalls. Scaling today isn't about omnichannel in theory. It's about aligning brand, demand, retail, and marketplace around how consumers are actually behaving. So today, with our amazing panel, we're going to talk about what actually works when discovery, retail, and Amazon collide. Ruben, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Okay. So I've heard you say before that brands have to define a home base before they expand. Why is that so important right now?
I think that, as a brand builder, you're developing a brand and a product that is appealing to ideally a target segment, a larger audience, but a target segment. And I think it's important to know as you're doing that and you're making the choice around where that product is being made available to the consumer, that's a very important that's an important relationship. That's an important start. And it's really important that there be enough time for the brand to actually resonate and get trial and get traction with the consumers and the shoppers who are actually buying in that particular place. And I think I talk about that as home market. It could be home channel, home market. But one of the dynamics or the downsides that happens is in the race to get multiple points of distribution, right? Everybody's got a P&L. Everybody has a target that you have to hit. Sometimes if you move too quickly, it doesn't give you enough time to really curate and cultivate what's happening in terms of that relationship. And it can actually put you into a death spiral.
Is there a way that a brand would know whether or not they're expanding from that place of strength or they're just chasing?
Yeah, I think, listen, I always talk about with the incredible CEOs and teams that I work with, the P&L never lies, right? And the P&L always tells you the truth. And it really comes down. So if your productivity isn't hitting the thresholds that you need, if your turns aren't hitting in the way that you need them to be, if your gross to net is escalating because you're having to buy trial, if you're not getting a return on investment in terms of the products that you're launching, et cetera, those are all signals that you've got work to do where you've initially planted, kind of your flag. And every business has different dynamics to it too. It also depends on how collaborative the retail partnership is as well. But you'll know, right? And if you're not hitting the fundamentals and fixing on the fundamentals, and you're just moving to try to get the next PO, and trust me, I've been there. Those are the signals, right, for a brand.
Yeah, and Genevieve, Way Hair Care has kind of made that shift, thinking more about growth by channel P&L, right? So what was the impetus for this shift, and what has the impact been to your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So Way is a 10-year-old brand, and historically, we had always viewed the channel P&Ls in a silo. We looked at the profitability of Amazon, the profitability of D2C, the profitability of Sephora, and that became a problem as we grew and as we expanded distribution because it wasn't actually representative of where the growth was coming from, and it was no longer representative of the consumer journey. And obviously, this is not like a net new concept, right? We all understand as marketers that the consumer is exploring everywhere all the time, but I feel like it's a little bit harder to get alignment with broader teams, especially financial teams, and when there's a lot of noise in the space, right? Amazon is a channel that's growing significantly. A lot of brands are getting onto it. A lot of brands are increasing their investment on that channel, which is important, but it also makes you make really fast and short-term decisions that may not actually be truly reflective of where your growth is coming from. So at Way, what we've implemented, especially on the media side, is a consumer level P&L where we're not just looking at where the conversion is ultimately happening, but also looking at the channels that are doing other work, like driving demand or driving education. And so we're looking at that while also looking at where that demand is ultimately being captured. And the benefit of that is that we've been able to be a lot smarter about where our investments are going. We're not making short-term decisions about pulling back from a certain P&L because it doesn't look as healthy or as profitable when evaluated in a silo. And it's also allowed us to actually get a lot more aggressive with our brand versus performance investment. And we've seen some significant growth, which is really exciting for a 10-year-old brand.
Well, and it's also like your silos aren't competing with each other for the
Exactly.
P&L, you're working together, right? So Rena, you have said that where we are in this time of space, it is more competitive than ever to start a beauty brand and that it's also a lot more expensive. What is it about where we are right now that makes that so?
Sure. You're absolutely right, especially on Amazon and especially in beauty. It has never been easier to launch, but it has never been harder to succeed. The barrier to entry is so low, but the bar to win is so much higher. And Jen and I were actually in a meeting on Tuesday talking about this very thing. And my team decided to take a look into this, right? How much more expensive is it? And we found that it is about 20% more expensive to run a beauty brand on Amazon today than it was 2 years ago. So that means that brands are spending 20% more just to keep up in the same exact space. And that bar keeps rising every single day because brands that were once holdout brands are now on Amazon. So really understanding your category, your subcategory, your competitors, and what that space looks like, because today it's a completely different story than it was yesterday. And tomorrow it will be more competitive than today.
So they have to be ready.
Yeah.
So Ruben, we've talked about in terms of retailers and exclusives. Let's be honest here, how does that affect brands when retailers are putting that kind of pressure?
Listen, I think this isn't, it is, if you're a retailer and if you're a brand builder, we all have really difficult, sometimes competing objectives that are happening, right? So I just want to put that out there that nobody has an easy ride on this. And so I'll answer it from the perspective of a brand, okay? As a brand, one of the things that I think becomes a dynamic that is difficult is I understand why a retailer, and it goes back to my first point, why a retailer, if they're investing to bring your brand in, they've got the capital, they're helping you in building your brand, the last thing they want is for you to be promiscuous, right? I'm in, I'm out, I'm on to the next big thing. That's not worth it to them. And so brands need to understand that there is a period of time that you have to be able to do that. But I think some of the conversations that are happening, and they're happening even more in the current environment with some of the mass, some of the specialties, some of the prestige retailers who are going through their shifts, right? And if you're brand builders in the marketplace, you know the winky or the direct conversations you're having about, don't even think about going to that place because we're going to discontinue you. It misses the point of the consumer. And nobody's putting the consumer at the center of that conversation. And I think if you put the consumer in the middle of the conversation jointly, and you've given it enough ecosystem and time to really kind of start to develop a loyalty, right? There are ways to be able to move beyond just this exclusivity conversation, which I think is very short term, right? Because the reality of it is, and this is why I love what Front Row talks about with connected commerce. The consumer, as much as we want to think differently as brand builders, the consumer isn't thinking the way we are. They're discovering you in one place. They're going to another place to find it. They want to get it, when they want it, how they want it, at the time that they want it. And we did store tours this week, or yesterday actually. I was mortified as a consumer because you spent time, money, attention to create these beautiful displays and this point of sale merchandising that has consumer insight tied to it. And then you go into a store, 8 of the 10 SKUs are out of stock, or your POP isn't up, or it's on the wrong shelf, or you know what I mean? So as a brand builder, you look at that and you go, what the hell? Why am I not going to another place where my consumer is trying to find me, right? Again, not a knock to the retailers. You guys have a really hard job, right? But I think that's the conversation that we're not having enough of, which is if we're doing everything together, is the consumer, your shopper, my consumer, really getting the experience that all of us want to have happen? And I think there is a major shift that is happening, driven by a lot of forces like the Amazons of the world and like the TikTok shops of the world and the different dynamics and channel that I think is going to put more pressure on both brands and retailers to be putting the consumer first.
I agree. Genevieve, when you see newer brands out there, how do they misinterpret their funnel?
Yeah, I feel like Ruben, you put it so well. I mean, we would love to think that the Sephora consumer is completely unique to the Ulta consumer, to the Amazon consumer. And I feel like oftentimes, like the biggest misunderstanding that brands have is that the funnel is linear and channel specific, which wouldn't it be so nice if consumers neatly move from awareness to consideration to conversion only on one channel? But no, the funnel is messy, it's fluid. At Way, she's going into Sephora, discovering, our hair care for the first time, and then she's going to Amazon to validate reviews, and then she's going to our D2C to make sure that does it work for her hair type, is it going to answer the problems that she's trying to solve? And because of that, it's important that we are present everywhere and that we're thinking about that messy journey and that her experience, to your point, is similar where she's shopping and evaluating and researching and ultimately buying versus thinking about it in a silo.
Obviously, the Amazon integration is so important. Where do you think brands can get it wrong?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's thinking about Amazon just as a conversion engine or just as a discovery engine or that the entire funnel and journey is happening just on the Amazon app. The way that we look at Amazon at Way is both as a validation layer, right? It's recognizing that there's all these really important consumer signals that consumers are looking at. They're reading the reviews, they're checking to make sure they have the best pricing. They are building that confidence before making a purchase. And at the same time, we're seeing that Amazon is starting to show up earlier in the consumer journey, right? It is starting to take over traditional search behaviors, unlike it has before. And so because of that, we look at it as part of our entire media ecosystem as not just a retailer, but also as a marketing engine and as sort of a canary in the coal mine or a way that we can take advantage of all the data that Amazon has in understanding what content and creative is resonating with our consumer, what's not resonating, and how she's actually engaging with our products and building routines.
Well, and Ruben, you've said before how Amazon has reset consumer expectations.
Yeah.
So how can that translate for brands?
So 3 out of 4 households in the US have an Amazon Prime account. If your household is 18 to 34, it's higher than that, right? And so just that point alone, if you think about the expectation that if I'm going to choose to buy outside of a retail environment, I expect it next day. Sometimes I expect it that afternoon. That's 3/4 of the US population's households now have that as an expectation, okay? That fundamentally changes the game in terms of if my direct-to-consumer business is my primary vehicle that I'm getting my product to the consumer, and I don't have a way to do that and meet that expectation, I'm probably underperforming what a consumer would expect if they go to Amazon. Same thing with our retailers. If I walk into a store, I can't find the product because I've seen it and I've got an influencer talking about go find it at X retailer. I walk in and I can't find it. First thing I literally see consumers doing this, getting on their phone, looking on Amazon, looking at the DTC site, right? And so it's much easier for the consumer now to pick where they're going to go. And probably the most sobering one, I'm the son of a hairdresser. I grew up in the salon world. Watching one of our brands, an incredible brand, watching what happens in a salon with a client who's sitting in a chair, having a service, the hairdresser is using a beautiful product from Amika, and that consumer is literally on their phone, scrolling on Amazon or scrolling the website to get the details of the product that they're not hearing from the service provider, and then making a decision where they're gonna buy, right? Sometimes they'll buy it directly from the hairdresser. Sometimes they'll order it because they've already got a market basket that's waiting. My point is that connected consumer dynamic, it's about where are they making the purchase, but it's more than that. It's about how are they getting intimate and understanding about your brand, your product, the claims, all of those things. It's a very interconnected world now.
Well, and to your point, as far as stylists, for the hairdressers, that's obviously a professional point of view that they're getting, right? But like me as a consumer, I do want to go to Amazon. I want to see real people using it. I want to hear the good and the bad, because a lot of times the cons aren't necessarily going to match up with, I'll be like, oh, that does, I have curly hair naturally, so that's fine for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it goes back to what you said, Genevieve, is that if you're thinking of your P&L in these separate silos rather than as one team, they're competing against each other, right?
Jenna, there's one other thing on Amazon that
Yeah, please.
I want to tell, that may be a little controversial. I hate the marketplaces. I literally do not like them as a brand builder, and I'll tell you why. If I am spending all this time and money to create a product that actually works, and then someone goes into a marketplace and sees a counterfeit product, because that barrier to entry, which is so great for us as entrepreneurs, is also the bane of a brand's existence, right? They're replicating your product. It's available on the marketplace. The marketplaces say, oh, it's not my problem. I'm just the retailer. That is one of the emerging issues that folks like Amazon, TikTok, Ulta now with their marketplace, people that are retailers, I'm begging you, that are in the marketplace space, you have to address how you're going to deal with counterfeits and legitimacy. Not just for me as a brand, but for you as your consumer. Do you want your shoppers buying under your retail banner a product that is counterfeit and can make their hair fall out? Absolutely not. So it's a joint issue for us, right? So that's how it's also changing the dynamic.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, obviously, what we're talking about today is timing is everything, right? You make one wrong move and you're going to burst your funnel. So this question is for all of you. Let's start with you again, Ruben. What is the biggest risk of launching the wrong channel at the wrong time?
Yeah, I think it's, listen, I think about it as an analogy, kind of like a real estate, right? I buy my starter home, then I want to put the landscape in, then I want to put the furniture in, and now I've got it looking great, right? But I get really excited about some new piece of property, and now I get another mortgage, and I go and buy that one, right? All of a sudden, I can't afford both of them. It's the same thing in terms of distribution, right? And that's why I talk about winning in your home market. You have to have a position of strength where you understand what works with my brand, what are the investments that deliver the right ROI, do I have stability in terms of the revenue stream and the profitability before I have to go co-invest with my other partner on entering into a new market and creating a new dynamic with my retailers. So if you go too fast, you're stressing out your team, you're diluting your revenue, you're investing. Sometimes those investments are not short-term, they're multi-year return on investment type investments. You could literally get to a place where you start to run out of cash, right? And I think that's, in the worst case scenarios, you could go too fast and go out of business. In more probable scenarios, you just don't have enough resources to keep the engine going in the place you've started, and you don't have enough to accelerate in the place you've kind of gone to.
Well, and I think too, sometimes newer brands will have stars in their eyes when they get the call from that magic retailer. And they're like, of course we're doing it. I don't care how we're doing it, we're doing it. Then 6 months down the line, they're like, I made a mistake, because I think it's almost the allure, right? And it's hard to make that realistic decision. So Genevieve, what do you think?
Yeah, I think similarly to Ruben, I feel like the biggest mistake you can make is not defining the purpose or the role of that channel prior to entering, because I feel like that then impacts and informs your media strategy, it informs your product assortment, and it informs and should help answer the hypothesis, is this channel actually incremental to me? Is my consumer already there? And I feel like brands oftentimes just get really excited about the next big thing, the next thing that's going to help deliver growth, when really it could actually be cannibalizing your existing channels or not answering a consumer need. And you're seeing short-term growth where you're needing to put in a ton of investment, and long-term, it's not a channel that makes sense. And that's a lot more painful.
Rena, you are on the front lines, right? So you're seeing everything, every success and every mistake. When brands are coming to you, what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing in terms of timing, especially?
So in terms of timing, and similar to what both of them said, what's really risky is moving fast without the foundation. So we all want to move quickly. Me personally, patience is not my strong suit, right? I'm a native New Yorker. I walk fast, I talk fast. Yes, we want to move fast, absolutely. But when we're moving fast without having that foundation, all we're doing is just creating more work. So just like Ruben walked the store, right? You had Star Walks. We do digital Star Walks. We call them digital Star Walks. And what does the content look like, right? So before you're driving traffic, we're spending millions of dollars driving to our virtual pages, to our detail pages. What does the traffic look like? What does the content look like before we're driving that traffic? Are we even in stock before we're driving all that traffic? Understanding that 90% of consumers searching and viewing on Amazon actually happens on mobile. So what does your mobile experience look like versus your desktop experience? So that foundation is so critical before we begin pouring the traffic, the dollars, and putting all that investment in. That foundation is so critical. Otherwise, we're spending time cleaning it up, fixing the problems, rather than spending that time scaling growth. And understanding that that conversion will happen at the point of detail page, absolutely, but it has to look its best before you get there.
Well, and brands that work with you are also able to be more proactive because you have all of the data in front of you.
Right.
And you're able to really make finite decisions based on what you're seeing.
And then we're able to measure it all.
Exactly.
I have one extra thing to add to that, just something Rena and I were talking about again on Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, it was a great meeting.
Yeah,
Basically, I think to add on, brands often look at Amazon as an afterthought, right? Like it's not really integrated into their overall, like the way that they're thinking about retailers, the way they're thinking about creative, product assortment, et cetera. You know, they'll look at Amazon as being a standard replenishment channel. Oh, it can, handle the products that we're looking to discontinue. Not really thinking about the fact that Amazon is so deeply connected with how social media, how consumers are engaging on social media, what creators are talking about. And so not having the Amazon experience feel similarly to what your D2C looks like, or what your Sephora.com, Ulta.com looks like, that's a big miss, because that's where consumers are going after they're engaging or discovering your brand.
And this is why they're the best client ever, because they understand all of it.
Well, and it also goes back to what Ruben was saying in terms of convenience, right? Like the consumer is very different today. And she is expecting that. And she may be discovering it, whether it's in a retailer or on TikTok or even on Instagram, or maybe even her best friend who's using it, right? And we all want it within 2 days if we can. We all want that dopamine rush of it, being able to unbox it just like we saw on TikTok, right?
Well, if you're in Manhattan, you want it this afternoon.
Yeah,
Right.
same day is nice. Same day is
Amazon
nice.
is moving more and more towards same day, moving all of their warehouses to then be fueling that same day delivery.
Or within 2 or 3 hours, right? So in this environment, like, is there still omnichannel? Like, you define it for us, like where we are right now.
So there's so many brands that are multi-channel,
Right.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're omni-channel. So they are everywhere, but they're not necessarily aligned. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that's the concept of connected commerce. And we talk about this a lot at Front Row, and it's almost the next iteration of omni-channel, right? But it's that integration of discovery, validation, conversion, regardless of channel, right? So it's not about the channel, but it's about the experience that we're giving the consumer. And when we think about what's missing, right, we have some brands like Way, like Amika, that get it, that omni-channel, but that connected commerce approach. But what's missing for certain brands, right, to your question, is that connectivity piece of it. Because no matter how powerful Amazon is, it absolutely is, but it cannot and it should not function in a silo, right? It's not in a bubble on its own. It really is connected into the full experience of every touch point where that discovery is happening, every marketplace, whether it's .com, whether it's their own digital flagship, as we call it, or it's on Amazon, that point through that consumer journey is that connected piece, which ultimately is that next iteration of omnichannel.
Is there a time when you're getting a stubborn brand that's like, no, DTC is my main source? How are you able to explain to them what you just said in terms of how the data is able to support and really make them a proactive brand?
Jen, I feel like you know my life. If stubborn brands are coming to us. No, our brands are not stubborn. They're all lovely. So absolutely, right? So, and it happens very often, right? There are brands, and your D2C is your digital flagship, right? And there's some ways that your D2C will do things that Amazon cannot. So, for example, you have much more customization. You have your consumer data. right? D2C actually has my name and my email address and my age, et cetera. Whereas at Amazon, you don't have that consumer data. D2C has loyalty programs, whereas Amazon doesn't. What Amazon has is the traffic, unlike anybody else, right? On Amazon specifically, we're looking at over 140 million consumers on a monthly basis. So Amazon has the traffic, and then they have the convenience and variety of it all. So the way that we prove it out is data. I always say facts over feelings. We could all feel a lot of things. We can feel that D2C XYZ, but let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts over feelings, and we can actually prove it out. So what we love doing is, I'm getting a little bit technical here, but I think it's a great example. So we will do an analysis where we will look at your D2C consumers, your Amazon consumers, and then look at that overlap analysis and see what that overlap is. And it's like, you guys can tell, it's a Venn diagram. And that overlap is actually sometimes quite small. So on average, anywhere between 10 to 15% that overlap. So what that means is that each channel is actually incremental and they have a place to play. Going back to Jen's point, defining the role, everybody wants to be incremental. We want Amazon to be incremental, and that's exactly what we do. We can prove out what we're doing is incremental based on, we can actually dedupe. We can like dedupe your D2C consumers, meaning not go after them, and keep Amazon strictly incremental. So if a brand comes and says, hypothetically, that D2C is our place to be, it's your place to be for a lot of ways, and that's not changing. But we don't view it as a competition, right? It actually is one, right? It's all one journey because it's part of it. We want your digital flagship, your D2C, to tell a story, to then come back, you do the research, it's beautiful, your SEO is there, and now your AEO, now your GEO, it's all part of it. They're reading the reviews, they're getting more validation through Amazon, they're converting, maybe they'll convert in a store, we don't know, but we want to make sure all of that works together. So we go back, we measure it through the data, but we actually make the channels work together versus like pin them against each other.
Yeah, and Genevieve, that was something how you were able to shift your business, right? Because it's almost siloed into their own separate businesses if they're all tracking their own P&L and they're not working together, like Rena said, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we go into Q&A. I'm going to start with you, Rena. If Amazon is where discovery, validation, and purchase collide, what does it take to engineer outperformance there? And what's the biggest risk of launching, as we said before, the wrong channel at the wrong time? How is that integrated?
Sure. I'm a big fan of alliteration personally, so I'm going to wrap it up in 3 C's. And it's actually everything that we've already spoken about. The first is obviously connected commerce, and that's that 360 approach. 2 is consumer centricity. Ruben mentioned it earlier, but as marketers, we are so focused on channel specific, but every single one of us in this room is also a consumer. So if we take our marketing hat off for 1 second and think about it from a consumer standpoint, putting the consumer at the center of our decisions rather than the channel. And then 3 is consistency. Getting that same consistent experience no matter where you're shopping, the store.com, your digital flagship, or Amazon. You want that feel that will create trust and confidence. Confidence is like the 4th C. Yeah.
How about you, Ruben?
Can you say the question again?
Yes, of course.
I loved her answer.
So if Amazon is where discovery, validation, and purchase collide, what does it take to engineer outperformance there?
Yeah, I think I can't really add more to what you've already said on the Amazon piece. I think it's you're right on the money there. I think the slight addition I would add is I think there's a lot of marketers and there's a lot of leaders in this room, and I think the unsung heroes in our organizations are our supply chain people, and for the retailers, it's your store operations people. The best strategy, the most brilliant innovation is worth 0 on your P&L if you can't get it in the hands of the consumer, if you can't ship it in time. And I think that's for us, and it plays out into Amazon as well. We have to make sure that the fundamentals of the business you're creating, that you don't forget about, am I building it? Am I forecasting it right? Can I ship it? And if you're a retailer, does your operational entities align with your merchandising teams, right? Because we all know there's great merchandisers who have incredible plans, and then the store operations team is disconnected from that, and you walk into what I was horrifically experiencing yesterday in Manhattan, where the out of stocks and all that kind of stuff, right? Why it ties back to the Amazon piece is that's where what I call the unsung heroes of the front rows of the world play a role, right? Because unless you're a top 10 brand on Amazon, good luck trying to find out who to talk to. Like, how do you even have the conversation to get into those things like my optimization, et cetera, right? So I think kind of I add a different spin to that, but I think it's all, if you can do all those things right, then I think you're in a position to be able to optimize. And the next holy grail in connected commerce is, can you actually give me market mix modeling to tell me where is my ROI happening across my different channels? But we know we're all trying to work against that.
Well, and you mentioned too about supply chain and operational. We're in a very unpredictable world, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
how are you guys able to really manage and balance that and plan for that, so that you don't walk into a retailer and see empty shelves where your products are supposed to be?
I mean, I think for at Way, again, kind of going back to my answer earlier around like defining the purpose and role, that's bleeds into not just the way that we think about it from a media lens, which is obviously the world that I live and breathe, but also it pertains to the way that we work with our demand planners and our operations teams. Is we are thinking holistically and together about how we buy, how we replenish, what do weeks of supply inventory looks like based off of that. And it helps to have all of those teams have that alignment together versus, just thinking about, okay, what do I need to do for the Sephora team? What do I need to do for the Ulta team? What do I need to do for Amazon?
And you didn't get a chance to answer this question. So if Amazon is where discovery, validation, and purchase collide, how do you work to engineer to outperformance in that environment?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both of them said as well. I feel like I'll just tack on a little bit more of the marketing lens for it. I think it's just recognizing that Amazon needs to be part of your entire ecosystem, not just thinking about, okay, how am I allowing the consumer to discover me on Amazon and then ultimately purchase our product on Amazon, but thinking about the fact that Amazon is so deeply influenced by the chatter that's happening outside of the Amazon ecosystem, right? Again, I talked about the connection that Amazon has made so well because it's a digitally native platform. It's integrated so well with social media, and it feels very natural to engage on TikTok, engage on Instagram, and then have your favorite creator link their storefront and go directly to their storefront. So thinking about and making sure that you're paying attention to the signals that is coming back to Amazon and making sure that you're there and present and ready to drive that conversion.
Right, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with convenience, right? So if they do see it and they see your product, but you're not on Amazon and you don't have that connected commerce, you might have just lost the sale.
Absolutely.
Right? Anything else before we go into Q&A that you'd like to add about connected commerce?
I think it's incredible, but I just think we're the opening act for Laura Geller, so I can't wait to meet Laura. I don't know how you guys are, but I can't wait to meet Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're crowd warmers.
Yeah.
Okay, yes,
Exactly.
we're the
Crowd
opening
warmers.
act.
We have it, so can we open it up for questions? Oh,
I think there's mics on your way. Yes.
yeah.
Thanks so much. Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Victoria Radford, and I own an indie brand called Radford Beauty. And I would love to know from everyone, what percentage of your business right now is done on Amazon, and what your goal for your percentage of what your business is done on Amazon?
Ooh, good question. So currently for Way, it's our largest retailer as of this year, which is really exciting. And I think, yeah, thank you. And I think it also shows, again, like the major shift that's happening at like a macro level. Like this is not specific to Way. I think a lot of brands are experiencing the explosive growth on Amazon. And I think that, again, in terms of what we want our mix to be, we don't have specific goals necessarily. I think kind of going back to this entire conversation, we're really looking at wanting Way to be, a heritage brand around for forever. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking really strategically about any net new distribution that we're making, and really more deeply investing in our existing distribution. And we feel like Amazon is an incredible partner for us. It's the right place. Our Way consumer is, she is across the board from a demographic perspective, but she is a younger demographic, and I feel like she is engaging very directly on Amazon, and it feels really right for where we are and the types of products that we provide.
Were there other questions?
Why aren't we talking about TikTok Shop and YouTube shopping in this panel?
Well, I think we're mostly focused on Amazon, but the idea of connected commerce, TikTok is part of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And TikTok Shop, I think what TikTok Shop has done is actually incredibly impressive because, it took Amazon 20 years to become the #1 beauty retailer. It took TikTok Shop 2 years to break into the top 10. That's incredible, right? So what TikTok Shop has done is cannot and should not be ignored. So absolutely, I love that you asked that question because it all works together, right? And TikTok Shop has a slightly different model, right? So super promotional, and then they launched the big deal days for beauty brands, and then it's connected through that social commerce. And this is where being agnostic, but being connected in the strategy. So at Front Row, we actually have, a lot that we do with TikTok Shop, both organically, so on TikTok and then TikTok Shop. But once again, we treat it as part of the connected commerce approach rather than in a complete silo. Because ultimately, for the brand, it's about where the consumer is in their journey. But we want to reach where they are, and we know they're on TikTok. So whether I think Amazon Finds as the hashtag on TikTok Shop has something like 18 billion views. So they're finding it, they're looking at it on TikTok, but then they're converting on Amazon. Or if the deal is more enticing on TikTok Shop, they're going there. But allowing your brand, if you really are as connected and consistent as we're talking about, then you're giving the consumer the choice and allowing yourself as a brand to be agnostic. But I love that you ask that because it's such an important piece and something that we can and we should be talking about, and it's something that we talk about with our brands all the time because both need to be true.
With guardrails.
Yeah.
So I'll give you another point. I'm a huge TikToker. I'm not a content creator, so don't look for me.
I was about to look you up. I got
Exactly.
excited.
Thank you. I know. But here's the thing from a brand piece that they're going to have to figure out. My brand shouldn't only be a value proposition based on price, right? And if all that great content and all that great stuff that we're doing with our creators then gets boiled down to, are you going to buy me because TikTok is making it a 50% off, which they've never engaged me as the brand owner in a conversation on. And all of a sudden, I've disrupted the value proposition and I've taken all the great stuff we've created and it comes down to, can I buy it cheaper on TikTok? There is no way as a brand builder I will ever want my brand to be there because that's the evolution of the partnership that I'm talking about, right? They'll figure it out. They're on a race to get eyeballs, et cetera, right? But we can't talk about the great stuff if we're not talking about the BS that also happens. And that can create major disruptions in terms of this ecosystem we've been talking about, right? Because guess what? If they buy it 50% off for your on TikTok Shop, they're not going to go back to your DTC and wait for 3-day shipping and all of a sudden pay 50% more, right? So this ecosystem is all connected.
Yeah, I have an additional point on that too. I feel like for Way, we are on TikTok Shops, but something that I feel like has helped to contribute to Way's growth is that we're really tightly controlled how our brand shows up in the world, right? We want to make sure, again, that everything is consistent, that the messaging and the education around how to use our products, what our brand stands for is super connected. And I feel like we've struggled with TikTok Shops in particular, where we spend a significant amount on TikTok, but we found that the creators that are available and to scale on TikTok Shops, you need to open the floodgates, right? And allow, consumer or creators to say, you can use, our shampoo as a face wash, which we don't want to have happen. And I think also we want to protect the price point and making sure that all of the retailers are not competing against one another. So we've been able to slowly but successfully scale on TikTok Shops by being really tightly controlled around the brand content and also about the promotionality. We pick and choose the assortment that we put on TikTok Shops that is to taking advantage of like where it is in the space, right? It's a impulse purchase, you know, or they want to trial a routine. So we, within our TikTok shops, have travel sizes. We have bundles that are unique to TikTok, and that's helped that channel scale while not cannibalizing or hurting the health of our brand long term.
It's a balance for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is all the time we have. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Janna. Thanks for having us.